Have you ever wondered why your discipline feels like a cage instead of a weapon? You wake before dawn, grind through routines, silence distractions, and keep pushing. Yet somewhere inside, a quiet voice whispers, "Why does it still feel empty?" You obey every rule of success, but peace never arrives. Your schedule is perfect, but your spirit trembles. The truth is that modern discipline has become an armor that isolates rather than empowers. It hardens the shell, but leaves the core fragile. Centuries ago, in a mist-shrouded valley of ancient Japan, a young samurai named Masaru lived beneath the distant shadow of his master's fame. Each morning he rose before the sun and trained until his breath turned to frost in the winter air. His blade whistled through the fog, carving arcs of invisible wind. The clang of steel against the wooden post echoed through the mountains, a rhythm of control and determination. Villagers admired his dedication. His fellow warriors envied his precision. Yet beneath that iron surface, Masaru carried a restless hunger he could not name. He was disciplined by every outward measure, perfect, but when the training ended, a hollow ache filled his chest. He could command his muscles but not his thoughts. He could subdue his opponents but not his impulses. Pride clung to him like dust to lacquer. When he failed to execute a flawless strike, anger burned behind his eyes. When praised, he felt a rush of superiority that faded into shame. He sought mastery through control, but control became his master. One evening, after a long day of drills, Masaru returned to his hut on the edge of the forest. The lantern light flickered weakly, tracing shadows that trembled across the walls. Outside, the wind hissed through the pines as though whispering secrets he could not decipher. He removed his armor, but the weight remained. He sat beside his sword, its reflection glimmering in the dim glow. And he felt the faint tremor of his own hand. It was then that he realized his enemy was not weakness, nor fear, nor any rival warrior. It was the storm within his own mind. Days passed in silence. He wandered the forest paths without destination, his thoughts spiraling like fallen leaves. The autumn air smelled of cedar and distant rain. His reflection in the still pond looked both familiar and for a man trained to perfection. Yet fractured inside, one dawn, beneath a gnarled pine, he met an old monk named Haruto, whose robe was threadbare, but whose eyes seemed to hold the stillness of mountains. The monk asked no questions, offered no lectures. He simply sat beside Masaru. The silence between them stretched, unhurried, and profound. The forest seemed to breathe with them. Birds called faintly in the distance. The stream murmured against its stones. In that calm, Masaru felt his mind's turbulence begin to slow. For the first time, he did not fight his thoughts. He watched them drift and dissolve, after many days together. Haruto spoke a single sentence that pierced the young samurai's heart. "You have trained your sword to cut through air, but not your mind to cut through illusion." Those words ignited a painful clarity. Masaru saw that his obsession with discipline had become its own bondage. He was chained to perfection. Enslaved by the very control he worshipped, the monk taught him to begin each day not with movement, but with stillness. To let the world arrive before he acted. Masaru resisted at first. Sitting in silence felt like weakness. Yet, as mornings turned to weeks, he began to sense the shift. He learned to breathe deliberately, feeling air fill his lungs like water rising in a well. He observed each thought as if it were a cloud passing across the sun, acknowledged, then released. His sword practice changed. 2. Each strike became slower, deeper, guided not by tension but by awareness. When the village watched him train again, they saw something different. His movements were fluid, yet grounded. As though the blade itself breathed with him. There was no strain, no vanity, only stillness moving through motion. He no longer sought victory. He sought truth in each cut. The monk's words echoed through his training. Steel without calm is brittle. Discipline without peace is hollow. Through that transformation, Masaru learned that mastery was never about control, it was about surrendering the inner chaos that demands control. True power was born not from forcing stillness, but from releasing resistance. His old discipline had been the discipline of fear, the need to prove, to dominate, to perfect. His new discipline was the discipline of understanding, unshakable calm, rooted in acceptance of the self. This story, though draped in the garments of history, is the mirror of our modern struggle. Today, we call it burnout, anxiety, imposter syndrome. We build intricate systems of self-control, planners, trackers, morning routines, time blocks, accountability partners. We surround ourselves with structure because it feels like safety, but without inner clarity, structure becomes a fortress built on sand. We cling to discipline because it gives us identity, yet that identity is fragile. We chase progress without purpose, efficiency without essence. The reason modern discipline fails is not because we lack effort, but because we misunderstand balance. We discipline the body while neglecting the mind. We strengthen behavior but ignore consciousness. The warrior trains both. The outer without the inner collapses under pressure, and the inner without the outer dissolves into inaction. Discipline must unify both, or it destroys itself at its core. This failure is a psychological one. Humans crave certainty. We believe that if we control enough variables, wake times, habits, routines, we will finally silence the noise within. But neuroscience shows that the mind does not quiet through control. It quiets through regulation. True stability arises when the emotional brain and the rational brain align through practiced awareness, not suppression. The samurai knew this centuries before science proved it. The concept that guided Masaru's awakening is mushin the no-mind in Western misunderstanding. It sounds like emptiness, but its essence is presence. It is the still center within motion, where the mind does not cling to thought or emotion. In mushin, you act fully, but without inner friction. It is not detachment, it is unity. Every action flows from awareness rather than ego. The archer releases the arrow not to hit the target, but because the act itself is truth. Modern psychology now echoes this ancient wisdom. Flow states, described by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, are the scientific mirror of mushin, in flow. The prefrontal cortex, the seat of self-criticism, the brain's attention networks synchronize, reducing noise and amplifying focus. This is why high performers, athletes, and artists often describe time dissolving. They are not trying harder. They are trying less. Their effort becomes effortless. The mind no longer fights itself. Yet most people today approach discipline as resistance. They believe struggle equals virtue, exhaustion equals worth. But a mind locked in constant resistance cannot sustain peace. It burns fuel without renewal. The samurai understood that inner control was not about domination, it was about harmony. To command oneself, one must first know oneself. Imagine every act of willpower as a stroke of the sword. If your mind trembles, the cut wavers. If your thoughts are scattered, the blade shatters. But if your spirit is calm, even the lightest movement becomes decisive. The modern mind thrashes for control. The ancient mind listens. The first tries to win against itself. The second learns to flow with itself. This is where the philosophy of Kaizen continuous improvement meets neuroscience. Small, deliberate repetition reshapes neural pathways. Every act of calm presence, every moment of mindful discipline, strengthens the circuits of self-regulation over time. Awareness becomes automatic. Like a muscle that no longer needs conscious command, the samurai's training was not about grandeur. It was about precision in repetition. The body remembered what the spirit taught. Our culture often praises discipline as aggression, grind, hustle, overcome. But true discipline, the kind Musashi himself embodied, is gentler yet infinitely stronger. Musashi wrote that the way of the warrior is the way of balance. In one moment, stillness. In the next, strike. He believed that the sword and the spirit must move as one. If the mind hesitates, the body falters. If the spirit clings, the path clouds. His victories were not born from fury, but from clarity. Modern people fail at discipline because they chase external control while ignoring internal alignment. They want results without roots. But roots grow slowly, in darkness, nourished by stillness. You cannot schedule your soul, you can only tend to it. Moment by moment, breath by breath, until calm becomes the soil from which action grows. So when your motivation fades and your routines crumble, remember, it is not that discipline has failed you. It is that you have mistaken rigidity for strength. A blade that is too rigid snaps under stress. The strongest steel bends and returns. That is the paradox of the warrior's calm. Softness gives endurance. Stillness grants power. Through Mushin, discipline ceases to be punishment and becomes presence. Through awareness, repetition becomes art. Through stillness, control becomes effortless. This is the lost Musashi philosophy of inner control, the one the modern world has forgotten while drowning in busyness. You are not meant to conquer yourself through force. You are meant to understand yourself through stillness. When you train your mind to observe rather than obey every thought, discipline becomes natural. You stop fighting the tide and begin steering the current. You act, not react. You move, not thrash. You live, not merely perform. The path forward is simple but not easy. It begins not with more effort, but with deeper awareness. Sit before you act. Listen before you command. Feel before you decide. When your mind settles, your actions sharpen. That is the secret. Musashi understood that the sword is only as precise as the spirit that wields it. Now, if we wish to embody what Musashi truly meant by inner control, we must rebuild discipline not as pressure, but as presence. The modern world treats discipline as an external command, an order shouted from the conscious mind toward the reluctant body. But the samurai understood something far deeper. True control does not shout, it whispers. It does not demand obedience. It inspires it. When the body and mind move together, effort becomes grace. To train this state, we return to the old paths. Each principle of ancient Japan carries a code, a small door through which the modern mind can step into stillness. These are not rules to memorize, but practices to embody. Let us walk through 4 of them, each a pillar in the unseen temple of self-mastery. 1. Shizuka Tisaku, quiet preparation. The first discipline of inner control is silence before movement. The warrior's blade does not rise until his breath has steadied. Emotionally, this is the art of pausing before reaction. Before you open your phone, answer an email, or speak in anger, you wait, you breathe. You return to your center. The stillness before the strike is what makes the strike true. Modern science confirms this old truth. When we pause, when we breathe deeply and consciously, the parasympathetic nervous system activates. The amygdala's reactivity diminishes, and the prefrontal cortex, the seat of rational focus, reclaims command. In that moment of quiet, your biology aligns with your spirit. Your decisions stop being reflexes and become responses. To practice, choose one transition moment each day, before work, before a meeting, before training, and take 3 full breaths. Inhale through the nose, exhale slowly through the mouth. Feel the body settle. Speak or act only after the storm subsides. That silence, repeated daily, is the forge of inner control. 2. Kokoro Katachi, shape the heart. External goals collapse when they are not anchored to internal identity. The samurai trained not to become better, but to be the way itself. When the heart shapes the form endures. Emotionally, this principle asks you to define who you are beneath your actions. Discipline without identity becomes performance. Discipline with identity becomes truth, from a psychological lens. This connects directly to the theory of self-concept coherence. Repeated actions tied to a stable identity strengthen neural pathways that sustain behavior under stress. When you say, "I am focus," and act in alignment with that statement, your brain encodes that identity deeper with each repetition. You no longer rely on willpower. You rely on who you have become. To practice each week, write a single sentence that defines your state of being. I am steady presence. I am patient resolve. Place it where you will see it, daily, on your desk, on your mirror, beside your bed. Whisper it before you begin a difficult task. Let it remind you that discipline is not about what you do, but about who you are. 3. Senryan, steady progress mile by mile. In legend, Musashi said, "The path to mastery is measured not in victories, but in steps." Emotionally, this principle teaches that small consistency outweighs grand intensity. The warrior who swings his sword once with passion achieves nothing. The one who practices daily in silence becomes unstoppable. Modern life praises speed, but speed fractures attention. Slow repetition molds permanence. Behavioral psychology calls this the principle of habit consolidation. Every small, repeated action performed under the same context builds stable neural circuits that demand less energy over time. Change becomes self-sustaining, yet most people quit before these circuits mature. They chase immediate reward, not internal rhythm. To practice, take one behavior that matters and cut it in half. If you meditate for 10 minutes, begin with 5. If you read 10 pages, read 3. What matters is the daily ritual, not the scale. The power lies not in the effort, but in the return. The samurai's strength was not in his sword arm, but in the repetition that made the sword part of his soul. 4. Mushin Tenshi no mind under heaven. This is the heart of the Musashi philosophy. The moment when thought ceases to interfere with movement, when mind and world become one, emotionally. It feels like relesta dissolving of the watcher and the doer into pure flow. You cease to force. You begin to allow. Neuroscience calls this the transient hypofrontality of the flow state, a temporary quieting of the brain's self-referential regions. In that silence, focus deepens, performance rises, creativity awakens, stress fades. Every movement feels natural because it springs from unity, not division. To practice, while engaged in your work, shift attention away from outcome and toward process. Feel the breath as you type, the weight of your steps as you walk, the sound of your voice as you speak. When distraction arises, return to sensation. This practice, over time, dissolves the mental friction that drains energy. The mind becomes mirror-like, reflecting without clinging. As these 4 pillars intertwine, discipline transforms. It stops being an act of control and becomes an expression of harmony. You begin to notice that the same breath guiding your stillness also guides your precision. You start seeing that the same awareness calming your anger also sharpens your decisions. You realize that every act of discipline is not a battle to be won, but a conversation with your deeper self. And as this realization matures, motivation itself loses meaning. The warrior does not wake wondering if he feels like training. The artist does not ask if she feels inspired. Both act because the act defines them. This is the ultimate inner control, the point where doing and being are no longer separate. The modern mind craves stimulation. It flees silence as though silence were death, but silence is not the absence of life. It is the source of it. Within it, you begin to hear what has always been guiding you beneath the noise, an unbroken rhythm of awareness. The samurai sought this not through religion or doctrine, but through direct experience. Every cut of the blade, every step on the path, was a meditation, every victory, a byproduct of inner alignment. When the storms of failure command, your habits will not save you if they are not rooted in calm. But if your discipline springs from stillness, nothing can uproot you. You will act without panic, rest without guilt, and persist without exhaustion. You will understand that discipline is not about restriction. It is about returning to the moment, again and again, until the moment itself becomes your master. The man who lives this way does not seek control. He is control. His presence steadies rooms. His focus silences chaos. His calm disarms aggression. Such a person no longer needs to prove strength. He simply embodies it. In the writings of Musashi's Book of 5 Rings, he said, "You must understand that there is more than one path to the top of the mountain." This is not a call to scatter your focus, but to remind you that inner control is the mountain itself. Every path, discipline, patience, humility, repetition climbs toward the same summit, peace within movement. So now, ask yourself quietly, is your discipline a weapon or a wall? Does it cut cleanly through distraction, or does it imprison you behind perfectionism? If it is the latter, then the path forward is not to push harder, is to see deeper. Begin again, as Masaru did, with stillness. Breathe, let the noise settle. Watch your own thoughts drift by like leaves across a pond. Then, when your reflection becomes clear, rise, pick up your blade, your work, your art, your craft, and move, slowly, deliberately, without rush, without strain. The calm will carry you farther than force ever will. And when the world tests you, when failure knocks at your door, when exhaustion tempts you to stop, you will smile, quietly, because you will remember that you are not the storm, you are the mountain. Discipline will never save the man who cannot command his own mind. Motivation will never endure for the one who fears stillness. But for the one who unites outer effort with inner peace, life becomes a seamless motion. There are no wasted days, only moments of returning. There are no lost battles, only forgotten breaths. This is the lost Musashi philosophy of inner control. It is not hidden in temples or ancient scrolls. It waits within you beneath the noise of ambition, beneath the restlessness of the modern age. When you rediscover it, you will no longer chase control, you will embody it. So close this lesson in silence. Let your breath settle. Feel the quiet weight of your own attention. Remember that discipline without calm is brittle, but calm discipline, born of presence, endures through every storm. Walk gently, train deeply, act without rush, and when you forget, simply return. That is the way.